Well, it is coming down to the last few days of the most important election underway in the United States right now. And I speak, of course, about the New York City mayoral election where the Democrat socialist Zohran Mamdani is poised to take control of the most important city in America, promising hard left economics, free bus rides, rent freezes, and government-run grocery stores. Joining me now for the final word ahead of New York's mayoral race election is the New York Post City Hall Bureau Chief Craig McCarthy. Craig, thanks for joining me here on the U.S. Report. Now, a trio of polls your paper has reported show Zohran Mamdani with varying leads over ex-Governor Andrew Cuomo here in the home stretch, ranging from 10 to 25 points. Craig, is there any chance of Andrew Cuomo staging a comeback, a fight back here in the last days of the election?
No, I mean, at this point, listen, the last three polls that came out over the last 24 hours showed Zohran Mamdani with, a commanding 12 to 18, 16-point lead in this race. The question with pollsters now isn't about whether Zohran will win or not. It'll be, how much he wins by at this point. There's seemingly nothing that Andrew Cuomo has been able to do over the last few months at this point to even cut into that lead. He's barely been able to break into 30% until Eric Adams, who is the sitting mayor who was running for re-election until he abandoned that bid, dropped out of the race recently.
Tell me, what is the current feeling in New York City ahead of this election? I mean, are people hopeful or optimistic about what Mamdani is promising and what he's promising to bring? Because an awful lot of people I speak to are really, really nervous about what he could do, especially people who lived through the pre-Giuliani era in New York. To have a guy who talks about defunding the police and driving out the tax base seems like it's a potential disaster.
Well, at this point, voters are split. He hasn't been able to coalesce a majority of New Yorkers behind him. A poll that came out the other day from the right-leaning Manhattan Institute, pointed out that a lot of his principles, or a lot of his proposals, the free buses, the city-run food stores, aside from universal childcare, most of these things don't poll well with a majority of people. And the business community is obviously very nervous about this because he's proposed a tax on the wealthiest and the corporations. And the real estate community is a lot worried about him because of his pledges to freeze the rent in something we have in New York City that are rent stabilized apartments. So there's a bit of a shift here, but Democrats have been coalescing behind him, with the establishment coming out from people like Kathy Hochul or Keem Jeffries begrudgingly endorsing him over the last little bit, who are some of the top Democrats in the state and also D.C.
And what about some of these cultural issues around him? I mean, your paper, I believe, reported that his mother, Zohran Mamdani's own mother, who herself is quite a prominent filmmaker, said that she thinks of her son as not an American at all, her words, and that, quote, he thinks of himself as a Ugandan and an Indian. And others have seized on his comments about 9/11 and talking about his aunt, who wasn't actually his aunt, who said she felt uncomfortable taking the train after 9/11 because she wore a hijab. Well, I mean, I'm glad he identified who the real victims of that terror attack was. But how is all this going down?
I think what we're seeing right now in New York City when it comes to that is a shift in the electorate and this shift of the Democrat and the base here, right? So we're talking about somebody who is an immigrant, who his mother said he didn't feel American at that time. This interview was 2013. He came to this country when he was 7. He became a U.S. citizen in 2018. But there's been this shift, and what Andrew Cuomo, the things you're bringing up about the aunt and things you're bringing up about 9/11, obviously it being in New York City, a lot of these things have been shifting in the sense of those are attacks he was trying to land on them, which would traditionally, in the same thing with coming with anti-Semitism, right? So a lot of these things have come up with that. The shift of the base, the big blocks of voters in here are no longer the Jewish vote and the black vote, and more of the Indian and the Chinese vote in New York City. It's just a shifting demographic right now, and I think a lot of these things have been from a lot of attacks and all these kind of political maneuvering that have tried to create some fear, some bad negative press behind him to try to get support to Andrew Cuomo. But as I was saying, none of it has really moved the needle.